Halloween is about to knock at your door. People are gearing up for costumes, candy and fun, but what most don't realize is the dark truth behind this day. The history of Halloween is far stranger than most know. It began as an ancient Celtic festival called Samhain, when people believed the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest, and spirits roamed the earth. To ward off these spirits, people lit bonfires and wore disguises. Over time, what started as a day of fear and superstition has become a night of horror-filled celebrations. But beneath the surface, there are countless terrifying stories, untold, forgotten, until now. And what I'm about to tell you is one of the most chilling of them all. It all started about 2 weeks before Halloween. Lily had been acting strange, and at first I didn't think much of it. We all have our off days, right? She was quiet, more than usual, and distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. I thought it was just work stress, or maybe she was tired, but then she started talking in her sleep. The first time, it woke me up. It wasn't words exactly, just sounds, murmurs mostly, but every now and then I'd hear something like, "I'll come to you," or "soon." I shook her awake, and she had no memory of it. I didn't mention it. Figured it was just a dream. But things got weirder. She started insisting we go somewhere for Halloween. A town I'd never heard of. Somewhere remote, out in the middle of nowhere. Black Hollow, she called it. Said she'd heard about it from a friend, but when I asked who, she got quiet, avoided my eyes. I didn't push her, but the whole thing felt off. "I don't think we should go, babe," I told her, trying to sound casual about it. "Let's just stay here, maybe go to that party at your friend's place." That's when she started crying. I'm not talking about just a few tears. No, this was full-on, hysterical sobbing. She was shaking, gasping for breath, her hands clawing at my shirt, begging me to go. I'd never seen her like that before. Lily was always so strong, so level-headed. But now, it was like she was falling apart in front of me. "We have to go," she kept saying over and over. "You don't understand. We have to." I didn't understand. Not at all. But what was I supposed to do? I couldn't stand to see her like that. So I gave in, told her we'd go. I thought it would calm her down, but it didn't. If anything, she got worse. For the next few days, she barely ate. She wouldn't talk, wouldn't even look at me sometimes. I'd catch her staring out the window, her face pale, her eyes distant, and the talking in her sleep, it got louder, more distinct. I'd wake up to her whispering things like, "I'll come soon," or "It's almost time." I didn't know what to think. I told myself it was just stress. Maybe she was feeling overwhelmed with the holidays coming up. Maybe... I don't know. I kept trying to find logical reasons for it. But deep down, I was starting to get scared. This wasn't the woman I knew. The night before we left, I heard her talking again in her sleep. This time, it was different. There was something off about her voice. It was too low, too quiet, like it wasn't coming from her at all. I leaned closer, trying to make out what she was saying. "I will come to you," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "I'm coming home." Home? That didn't make any sense. I shook her awake, and she blinked at me, confused, as if she didn't know why I was there. I asked her about the dream, but she just shrugged it off, said she couldn't remember. I wanted to believe her, but something in my gut told me she wasn't being honest. The next morning, we left for Black Hollow. We drove for hours, winding through forests and hills, until the trees grew so thick that the sunlight barely reached the road. Black Hollow wasn't even on the map. I had to rely on the vague directions Lily had given me, left at this dirt road, right at the old barn. It felt like we were heading straight into nowhere. When we finally arrived, it wasn't what I expected. The town was small, just a handful of houses and shops clustered around a main square. But there was something wrong about it. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, like the entire place was holding its breath. The people, too. They were friendly enough, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes. They watched us as we drove in, their gazes lingering just a little too long. It was unsettling, but I told myself I was just being paranoid. Halloween was in full swing. People were dressed in costumes, traditional ones, but not the kind you'd see in the city. There were no witches or ghosts, no superheroes or princesses. Instead, they wore animal masks, intricate, hand-carved things that looked too real, too lifelike. Lily seemed drawn to them, like she was in some kind of trance. She barely said a word as we walked through the town square. Her eyes kept darting toward the edge of town, where a massive tree loomed in the distance. Its branches were thick and twisted, almost like they were reaching out toward us. That's when I saw it. There, beneath the tree, a group of people was gathered. They weren't partying, though. They were performing something. A ritual, maybe. I couldn't tell, but I saw blood. They were slaughtering animals, letting the blood soak into the roots of the tree. The air around the tree seemed darker, like it was swallowing the light. I grabbed Lily's hand, tried to pull her away, but she wouldn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the tree, her body rigid. She didn't say anything, just stared. "Lily," I whispered, trying to get her attention. "We need to leave, now." She didn't respond. That's when I noticed her lips were moving. She was whispering again, just like in her sleep. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but it sounded familiar. And then, before I could stop her, she let go of my hand and started walking toward the tree. "Lily!" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. But she didn't stop. She just kept walking, her eyes locked on that cursed tree. I ran after her, but by the time I reached the tree, she was gone. I called the police. I did everything I could, talked to the locals, begged them for help, even searched the woods around the tree on my own. The police came, searched the area, but like every other story from Black Hollow, they found nothing. No sign of her, no trace that she had ever been there. Days passed, and I stayed. I couldn't leave, not without her. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still there, somewhere, waiting for me. But I was running out of hope. Everyone in town kept looking at me with those blank stares, offering nothing but sympathy that felt hollow, like they had seen this before, like they knew the ending. I didn't sleep much during those days, but when I finally did, that's when the nightmares began. It started small. I'd dream of the tree, nothing else, just the tree, standing alone in the dark, its branches moving slowly, like they were alive. At first, it was just a shadow, something in the distance that I could barely make out. But as the nights went on, it got closer. I could see the gnarled bark, the twisted limbs. I could hear the faint rustling of its leaves, like whispers in the wind. And then the voices started, not loud, not clear, just faint murmurs, drifting in and out of the background. I couldn't understand them, but I knew they were calling me. Not with words, but with a feeling, a pull deep in my chest that I couldn't ignore. One night, I saw her. Lily. She was standing beneath the tree, just like in the stories. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and empty. She was looking at me, but it didn't feel like she was really seeing me, like she was somewhere else. I tried to call out to her, but my voice wouldn't come. I tried to run to her, but my legs felt heavy, like they were stuck in the ground. I could only watch as she stood there, the wind twisting her hair, her lips moving silently. And then, without warning, she turned and walked into the tree, disappearing into the shadows. I woke up, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. But it didn't stop there. The next night, the dream came again. Only this time, I wasn't just watching. I was there. I could feel the cold air on my skin, smell the damp earth beneath my feet. The tree was so close now, its branches swaying like arms reaching out for me. I heard the voices again, louder this time, almost like chanting. And then, just like before, I saw Lily. She wasn't standing still this time. She was walking, slow, deliberate, toward me. Her eyes never left mine, but there was something wrong with her face. Her expression was blank, lifeless, but her lips were moving again, whispering something I couldn't understand. She stopped just a few feet from me, raised her hand, and pointed toward the tree. I woke up gasping for air. Night after night, it was the same. The tree, the voices, Lily. Only each time, it felt more real. I'd wake up, but the dream stayed with me. The whispers echoed in my head long after I opened my eyes. The cold air, the smell of the earth, they clung to me, like the dream hadn't ended. Like I was still there, standing beneath that cursed tree. I started to notice things during the day too. Small things at first, a chill in the air, even when the sun was out, a faint rustling sound when there was no wind, and always that feeling in my chest, that pull, like something was trying to drag me back to that tree. I couldn't escape it. I didn't know if I even wanted to. The worst part, it wasn't just in my head anymore. One evening, after another long, exhausting search, I collapsed onto the couch, desperate for just a few minutes of peace. I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes, I was no longer in my living room. I was back at the tree. This time, it was different. The tree wasn't swaying gently in the wind anymore. It was towering above me, its branches twisting and writhing like they were alive. The voices were louder now, clearer, but I still couldn't make out the words. All I knew was that they were calling me, urging me forward. Lily was there, of course. She was always there, waiting for me. But tonight, something changed. She smiled. Not the warm, gentle smile I remembered. No, this smile was wrong. It was too wide, too sharp, like her lips were being pulled back by invisible strings. Her eyes were still empty, but her smile, it made my skin crawl. She raised her hand again, pointing to the tree, and this time I understood. She wanted me to follow her. I felt my feet moving on their own, taking slow, hesitant steps toward the tree. The ground felt soft beneath me, like it was giving way with each step. The air was thick now, almost suffocating, and the closer I got to the tree, the heavier it became. And then, just as I reached the base of the tree, I woke up. But I wasn't in my bed. I was standing at the edge of the forest, just a few yards from the tree. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my room, lying on the bed, drenched in sweat. My heart was still pounding, my chest tight with panic. But the memory of standing in the woods, so close to that cursed tree, was vivid. Too real. I could still feel the dirt under my feet, the cold air biting at my skin. It wasn't just a dream anymore. The line between waking and sleeping had blurred, and I didn't know what was real. I sat up, trying to shake off the lingering fear, when I noticed something strange. A piece of paper, folded neatly, was sitting on the nightstand. I hadn't left anything there, and I knew it wasn't mine. My hands shook as I picked it up and unfolded it. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges, the writing faint but clear enough to read. It was a letter addressed to me. Daniel, I know what's happening to you. I've seen it before. You're not the first, and unless you act quickly, you won't be the last. Your girlfriend, Lily, she's gone. I'm sorry. I don't write this to hurt you, but you need to understand that once the tree takes someone, they don't come back. Not as they were, not as you knew them. What you've seen in your dreams, what you've been chasing, isn't her anymore. It's a hollow shell, a lure to bring you closer. The tree doesn't want her anymore. It wants you. I've seen it before. Black Hollow has a long, dark history, as you've likely already discovered. But what you might not know is that the people here, they've accepted it. They know the truth, and yet they turn a blind eye. It's easier to live in ignorance than face what really haunts this town. The tree is ancient, older than the town, older than any of us can imagine. It's home to something dark, something evil. Varak, they call it. You've probably heard the name by now. A being of pure hunger, rage, and chaos, bound to that tree centuries ago by people who thought they could control it. They failed, and now it feeds on us, on our fears, our grief, our weaknesses. It takes the ones who are lost, the ones who are vulnerable, the ones it can manipulate. It lures them into the forest, into its domain, and it devours them. Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it takes years, but they never come back. Lily was vulnerable, wasn't she? Maybe she didn't show it, but something inside her was hurting, something you couldn't see. That's why it took her. That's why it's coming for you. But there's something you can do. It's too late for her, I'm afraid. But you can stop it from taking anyone else. There's an old ritual, one that hasn't been performed in centuries. It's dangerous, and it won't be easy. But it's the only way to bind Varak again, to lock it away. You can't kill it. It's too powerful, too old, but you can trap it. If you succeed, no one will have to suffer like Lily again. You need help. This ritual can't be performed alone. You must gather 7 priests, 7 of the most powerful spiritual leaders from around the world. Not just anyone will do. These men must be strong in their faith, experienced in dealing with the dark forces that few dare to acknowledge. Once they are here, you will need to lead them to the tree, where the ritual must take place. But there's a price. The ritual requires a sacrifice. The tree demands blood, and it won't let Varak be bound without taking something in return. Someone will have to stay behind. Someone will have to give themselves to the tree. I know it's not what you want to hear, but this is the only way. The tree won't be satisfied unless it gets what it wants. It's your choice, Daniel. You can try to fight it alone, but you'll lose. Or you can gather the priests, perform the ritual, and end this once and for all. You won't save Lily, but you can save others. You can stop the nightmare from spreading. If you're willing to do what's necessary, follow the instructions on the next page. You don't have much time. Halloween is almost here, and once the veil between worlds thins, Varak will be at its strongest. If you wait too long, it may be too late for all of us. Remember, you must act quickly. And whatever you do, don't go back to the tree alone. May God protect you. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. The letter was unsigned, and I had no idea who could have left it. The door had been locked, and I didn't remember anyone coming in. But the words, they felt like a lifeline, even if the reality they described was horrifying. Lily was gone. I wanted to scream, to tear the letter apart, to deny everything it said, but deep down, I knew it was the truth. The Lily I saw in my dreams wasn't real. She was just a ghost, a shadow created by the tree to lure me in, just like the letter said. The only way to stop this nightmare was to gather the priests, to perform the ritual, and to make the ultimate sacrifice. I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I could live with the idea that I might have to give my life to the tree. But the thought of more people suffering the same fate as Lily, of more lives being destroyed by that ancient evil, I couldn't let that happen. I turned the letter over and saw the instructions for the ritual. They were old, written in Latin, with diagrams that made my skin crawl. The process was long, complex, and filled with steps that could easily go wrong. But if we could pull it off, it would trap Varak for good. The letter also included the names of 7 priests, men from different corners of the world. I didn't know how I was supposed to contact them, but their reputations were well known in certain circles. Each of them had dealt with powerful forces before. exorcists and spiritual leaders with stories almost too horrifying to believe. But I knew somehow that they were my only chance. The next days were a blur. I reached out to each priest, explaining what I could, trying to sound as sane as possible. Some were hesitant, but all of them had heard of Black Hollow and the Hallowing Tree, even if they hadn't dared face it themselves. Slowly, one by one, they agreed to help, though the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on us all. By the time Halloween arrived, the 7 priests had gathered in Black Hollow. Father Gregory, the priest I had first contacted, led the group. He was a serious man, with tired eyes and a quiet strength that made you feel like he had seen too much. "We can do this," he told me, as we prepared to head toward the tree. "But you have to be ready. It's going to fight us every step of the way." That night, as the clock struck midnight, we stood before the Hallowing Tree. Its massive branches loomed over us, casting shadows that seemed to stretch for miles. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, and I could hear the faint whispers in the wind calling my name. The priests began to chant, their voices rising in unison as they circled the tree. The ground beneath us trembled, and I could feel the presence of Varrock growing stronger. It knew what we were trying to do, and it wasn't going to let us succeed without a fight. The ritual reached its peak, and the air around the tree grew colder, darker. The priests' chants grew louder, more urgent, as they struggled to contain the entity's power. The tree groaned, its branches twisting violently as if trying to break free. Then, just as the final words of the ritual were spoken, the earth split open beneath the tree, and I saw it. Varrock, the entity that had taken so much from me. It was a mass of shadows and twisted limbs, its eyes burning with hunger and rage. It screamed, a sound so loud, so terrifying, that it felt like the sky was going to crack open. But the ritual held. The priests continued their chants, their voices steady, unwavering, and slowly. The tree began to bend, as if the very force of the ritual was binding it. Varrock fought back, but the power of the 7 priests was too strong. And then, it was over. The tree stopped moving, its branches still, its roots bound tightly by the power of the ritual. The ground stopped shaking, the air cleared, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was silence. But I knew what had to happen next. The letter had warned me, the tree demanded a sacrifice. The priests stood by, waiting for me to make my choice. I looked at the tree, at the place where I had lost Lily, where so many others had been taken, and I knew what I had to do. I stepped forward toward the tree, toward my fate.